The battle starts. Savage takes a swing at Sting, but he blocks it. When the hosts see Sting manage to fight back, they stutteringly ask what is going on and announce that Sting is putting on an unexpected performance. The host then shatters everyone's expectations of a painful defeat, because Sting and Karen are blocking every single one of Savage and Brian's attacks. Brian laughingly tells Karen that he thought she was just an amateur, but he sees she has some skills. However, it is still not enough to satisfy him. Savage then raises both his huge axes and cuts off Sting's arm, making Philip shout to Sting that she can't lose. However, he remains silent, noticing that Sting has the upper hand in terms of mana flow and wonders just what they are thinking because they aren't using their mana at all. Brian laughingly tells Karen to get up because Sting's legs are still attached, and if she can't fight anymore, all he can offer her is more destruction. Savage then raises both of his axes again, making Philip panic and roll around, shouting that they're going to lose all their money at this rate. Savage then swings down his axes at Sting, but Karen activates her mana. When Savage's attack hits, it causes the floor to shatter into pieces, but Brian is shocked when Sting disappears. Sting then appears from above, while Karen asks Brian if he is aware that Betsing Jugget matches can be adjusted up until 30 seconds into the match. She tells him that just now, that time frame has passed, so she can't afford to pay for any more repairs than this. Karen then casts her magic power and releases a fire blast using Sting to attack Savage. The hosts, in shock, ask how this could be and announce that an unprecedented event is happening today. Both hosts then announce that their champion, who bested the odds of 20-1 with pure skill, is Sting. Sting raises his one hand in victory. Philip shouts in happiness that they won and insists that he believed in him the whole time, though he is in shock and can't believe they use magic. He thinks it couldn't be possible, leaving Philip confused. Philip then explains to him that Sting's rider Karen must have been a rune knight. While it is uncommon to see Juggins using magic, they must have been hiding their strength to raise the odds. However, he knows that isn't the most important thing, because the fundamental theory behind using magic through weaponry is something he developed. He states that this method, no matter how much time passes, cannot be replicated by others, because it is a process he completed with the use of black magic. Later, in the Juggin Arena hangar, Philip asks him why he wanted to come to the hangar, but he remains silent. Philip asks again if they should head back as soon as possible, making him angrily shout at Philip to shut up because he is busy thinking, and Philip isn't. Suddenly, they hear Victor's voice shouting at someone that she could still change her mind, and asking how she got into a match with a Juggin like that. Victor also tells Reina that it wasn't a fight she should have accepted in the first place. However, she responds that a mercenary like Andre would have no trouble riding Meyer to fight the Count's Juggant. Philip tells him that they ran into Princess Reina again, and that she seems to be having some problems. Victor then asks Reina why she agreed to such a rash duel and reminds her that she'd need to marry the Count if she lost, which isn't a decision she can take lightly. Yet, she firmly tells Victor that she made her choice carefully, and, if she didn't accept, countless refugees would have starved to death. To save everyone, it was the only way. Victor shouted to her that it couldn't be, and asked how sacrificing her future could be a viable option. Victor added that, with a Juggant that was falling apart, it was obvious she would lose. He accused her of wanting to protect the refugees so much that she didn't think about her own life, and asked why she didn't seek to protect herself at all. He told Philip that they should leave as he was finished, and they should head back, to which Philip replied, "Okay." He then walked back toward the exit of the hangar, telling himself that Reina was not Katarina, and he didn't need to get involved. However, he overheard Victor telling Reina that she was just selling herself off, and that the Count was a man who stopped at nothing to get what he wanted. The mechanic then reminded Reina that the Count had threatened the refugees many times before, and that without her, the refugees would truly be helpless. The mechanic added that if she wasn't completely changing the Mana Stone, the Juggant wouldn't even be operable, but even if it was, the difference in specs compared to Count Monarch's Juggant would be too large to put up a proper fight, so she should listen to her butler. She replied that she was well aware of this, but she couldn't give up because if she lost without even trying, she wondered who else would stand up for the weak and cry in pain. At that moment, he approached them and asked if he could take a look. Reina looked back in surprise, but he simply told them that he thought the Mana Stone and the Juggant could still be used. Victor immediately stepped in front of Reina protectively and shouted for her to stand back. Victor then accused him, saying it was too convenient to be a coincidence, and suggested they could be assassins sent by Count Monarch. He angrily told Victor that he had been getting on his nerves, but Philip laughed and told Victor to put away the sword. He introduced him as Luc de Lacan, the 15th descendant of the Lacan family and the current lord. However, Victor asked how they could trust his words. Reina then ordered Victor to stand down and walked closer to them, which made Victor visibly worried. She apologized for their previous meeting and admitted she was embarrassed to admit it, but they had no other way. She added that if it was all right, she'd like to ask another favor of him and begged him for help, to which he simply agreed. He then took out a dagger and told her it was to ensure he wouldn't make a mistake this time. He walked toward the open juggin and told them he would make sure to show off his skills. The mechanic sighed and called out to Reina, telling her that juggin repairs couldn't be done by just anyone. One of the other mechanics added that there was a reason juggin specialists were called iron mages. They then asked if Simon might damage the juggin further and muttered that nobles with their massive egos always thought they knew everything. Philip grabbed the two mechanics and asked if they wanted to place a bet with him. Philip then angrily wagered 10,000 pesos that his seamen could easily fix the juggin that they had failed to repair. One of the mechanics angrily asked why they would take an offer like that, but Philip teasingly replied that they didn't need to take it if they were scared. The mechanic, angered, asked what he meant by that and shouted for him to double the stakes because he was in. Reina then asked Philip if she could ask him a question, to which Philip immediately replied, yes. She then pointed at Simon and asked if a tool like a dagger was typically used to fix juggins. Philip was equally confused, but then Simon slashed his palm with the dagger, stunning Philip in shock. Philip worriedly called out to him, but Simon sighed and shouted for Philip to shut up and just keep watching. Philip asked what he was planning. Simon then placed his bleeding hand on the machine and began to draw a magic circle on it with his blood. After completing the magic circle, he cast a spell, causing the mana stone to glow. When he saw it, he immediately ordered it to rise. The juggin released a powerful surge of energy in response. 500 years ago, in front of the magic tower, Simon was walking around and saw the destroyed golems scattered around him. He stopped in front of the remaining golem and asked if they had truly fallen to such a state. He then released his dark magic, declaring that they were immortal beings, those who lead their enemies to hell, and ordered them to answer his summons once more. The destroyed golems lying on the ground stood up in response and began to restore themselves thanks to his dark magic. As before, he managed to awaken the destroyed juggin and make it functional again. Philip proudly shouted that it was as he expected and that he had always believed in him. Meanwhile, the two mechanics were on the floor in disbelief. Reina was in shock, witnessing that he had truly done it, and Victor wondered how Meyer was moving once again. Reina couldn't believe Luke was able to revive a dead magic crystal, as she had never heard of such magic in her life. She realized that the entire continent or even the world would be amazed at such a historic event. Philip happily told him that there was nothing he couldn't do and said he'd believe him even if he claimed he could make a golem out of rocks. One of the mechanics shouted that it was impossible and accused him of using some kind of trick. They also questioned if drawing a magic circle with blood and activating it didn't clearly sound like black magic. Philip, visibly angered, asked them if they dared to accuse the sole heir of the Lacan family of using black magic. However, the mechanic retorted that, no matter how they looked at it, it was black magic. Luke intervened, explaining that the truth was, it was a top-secret technique passed down by the Lacan family, kept hidden for nearly 500 years. The mechanic still found his explanation hard to believe and asked what kind of swordsman family would have a secret magic technique. At that moment, Reina interjected, saying that it didn't matter. Even if it was black magic, Luke had saved countless lives. She thanked him sincerely and apologized for her misunderstanding during their earlier meeting. Luke replied that it was fine and that her misunderstanding was no surprise. He was then caught off guard when she held his hand and wiped away the blood. Reina told him that he was hurt because of her and insisted that he allow her to treat him, at least as a small repayment. He calmly responded that if it would put her at ease, she should be his guest. Suddenly, someone rushed to them in a panic, shouting that there was a huge problem. Victor demanded to know what had happened to make him scream his head off. The man stuttered as he shouted that Andre was gone. He wasn't in the waiting room and they had searched all over the lodging but couldn't find him. Reina was horrified by the news. Meanwhile, at Count Monarch's estate, someone reported that they had succeeded in winning over Andre, leaving Princess Reina without any rider she could use. However, the informant hesitantly added that it seemed they had somehow succeeded in repairing their gigant. The Count, surprised, asked if he hadn't been told that their Gigant couldn't be activated. The man confirmed that this had indeed been the case, but explained that it had recently been activated. The Count slapped the man, making him stumble back and apologize profusely. The Count coldly told him that he hated apologies the most because they signified mistakes. The man begged fearfully for another chance, swearing that he would ensure the Count's wishes were fulfilled. However, Count Monarch sneered and ordered the man to scram, shouting that he was fired. Angrily, Monarch muttered that he had lost his appetite and asked his servants if there were any other variables. One of his servants stammered a response, assuring him that there were none. Monarch declared that there couldn't be even a sliver of probability left unaccounted for until Princess Reina was completely his. Soon, he vowed, everyone would know exactly what kind of man the master of Monarch truly was. Later, in the arena, the host announced the fight between Princess Reinasmire and Achilles. They told the audience there was an overwhelming difference between the two. The host then called out Count Monarch's opus magnum, Achilles, and proclaimed it to be the champion of the fiefdom, boasting 78 victories and not a single loss. They urged the audience to see what Meyer had prepared against the ever-victorious champion. However, Meyer was nowhere to be seen in the arena, prompting the host to ask if they had abandoned the match. The audience began shouting, accusing Meyer of running away in fear and demanding their money back. Monarch, observing the crowd's reaction, laughed and wondered if Reina's side had given up because they didn't have a rider. He sneered at Reina, telling her that this was why she should quietly have accepted his marriage proposal. Now, he would show her the consequences of bruising his pride. Meanwhile, in the hangar, Reina asked her servant if he truly meant that Andre was gone. The servant confirmed that Andre was nowhere to be found and suggested that Monarch had tricked them. Victor shouted at the servant, insisting that Andre was a loyal vassal and demanded to know if he was implying that Andre had betrayed them. The servant stammered and explained that witnesses had seen Andre entering the Count's camp. Victor cursed, realizing that even without stealing Andre away, Monarch already had a significant strength advantage between their Gigants. He couldn't believe Monarch had stooped so low, crushing them with underhanded tactics instead of pure power. Reina stood speechless, trembling in fear. He turned to Reina and asked if it was true that she would be forced to marry Monarch if she couldn't participate. He assured her that if she allowed it, he could help her resolve the situation. Reina stammered as she asked how he intended to do that. Philip interjected, trying to express that while he didn't doubt him, he hadn't forgotten the accident that occurred the last time he attempted to operate a Gigant. He calmly told Philip not to worry, saying that operating a Gigant was just a piece of cake. Minutes later, the audience and the host were stunned when Meyer entered the arena. The host excitedly announced that Meyer had not given up after all, and had arrived just in time to face the ever-victorious Achilles. The crowd roared with excitement. Monarch, shaking with anger, demanded to know why Meyer was on the stage. He questioned his servant, asking if he hadn't assured him that there were no riders left on Reina's side. The servant stammered, insisting that he had been certain. Monarch began to suspect that Reina had hired a mercenary and couldn't believe it. He fumed, convinced that whoever was riding Meyer didn't understand the significance of this match. He couldn't fathom how anyone would dare to side with the princess in his territory. Reina and Victor arrived at the stage, and she anxiously asked Victor about the situation. Victor reassured her that they weren't late and that, fortunately, they had made it in time. She expressed relief but hesitated, voicing her concern that it might not be all right. She pointed out that, at a glance, the difference between the Gigant's performance was stark, and the opposing rider was Lumber Fiefdom's champion. Luke appeared behind her and assured her that it would be fine. He explained that, although he usually seemed simple-minded, the man on their side was highly skilled. Meanwhile, Philip sat inside Meyer, silently questioning why his young master, Luke, was putting him in such a position. The audience was shocked to see the destroyed Gigant and wondered if they truly intended to fight. One of the spectators laughed and shouted that they couldn't believe it, saying that Meyer should have just run. Another audience member teased, asking if they were seriously calling a piece of junk like that a Gigant and whether it could even move. Achilles addressed Meyer, applauding the fact that it hadn't run away, but warned that Meyer must understand the stakes of the match. Achilles declared that he had no intention of going easy on him. Philip, piloting Meyer, replied that Achilles would never know its true strength until he saw it in action. Achilles strikes a destructive blow in Meyer's direction, shouting that they should put Philip's confidence to the test. Philip managed to dodge the attack, noting that Achilles' power truly matched his massive size. Seizing an opportunity, Philip jumped behind Achilles and taunted him, saying that being big and strong didn't necessarily make him a good fighter. Achilles immediately turned and swings his mace at Meyer, shocking Philip with its speed. He barely managed to duck in time, avoiding the attack by a hair's breadth. Achilles remarked that Philip had dodged the attack, but declared that his confidence was clearly baseless. Meanwhile, Philip realized the situation was dangerous, recognizing that Achilles' rider was at least an expert knight. A moment later, the host announced that Achilles was unleashing a flurry of blows against Meyer, yet Meyer continued to dodge every single attack. Achilles, frustrated, launched another assault, but Meyer evaded again. The hosts commented on the unexpected turn of events, remarking that what they thought would be a quick match was turning into a prolonged battle, with Meyer not allowing a single hit to land. Victor cursed in frustration, shouting that they couldn't win by running forever. Reina whispered to Victor, telling him not to be so nervous because Simon had said Philip was a strong knight and they should believe in him. Simon overheard Reina's whisper and acknowledged that Philip had faced countless knights before, leaving no doubt about his skills. However, Simon thought Philip might need some education later, wondering why he was playing the role of a rat instead of fighting properly. On the other hand, Philip cursed loudly, questioning whether Achilles ever got tired. He stopped running and steadied his sword, muttering to himself about trying a sneak attack. He swung at Achilles, landing a hit that made Achilles pause. Philip wondered if it had worked, but Achilles, angered, asked if he was finally ready to fight seriously. Stammering, Philip replied. Not exactly. Achilles raised his weapon and shouted that he would now give it his all. The hosts, witnessing this, announced that Achilles was preparing his finishing move and questioned whether Meyer would be able to dodge even that. Philip stared at Achilles' weapon hurtling toward him, realizing he was in real danger. A loud explosion suddenly erupted on the stage. Achilles waited for the smoke to clear and was stunned to see that Philip had dodged the attack. Philip appeared behind Achilles, prompting Achilles to remark that Philip couldn't have gotten far enough to evade the strike. Philip quipped that his uncle Roger would kill him if he found out, but he had no choice. He needed to win because Simon had placed his hopes on him. Philip warned Achilles that he would regret forcing him to unleash his full power for the rest of his life. Achilles was impressed, amazed by strong aura radiating from Philip, despite his young age. He admitted that he had sensed something from Philip's movements earlier, but now realized he had finally met a worthy opponent. Suddenly, Monarch's face appeared inside Achilles' cockpit, angrily asking him what the hell he was doing, and whether he was crazy for struggling against a heap of junk like Meyer. Monarch reminded Achilles of the consequences of losing. Achilles apologized to Monarch for disappointing him and shouted that from now on he would deliver a satisfactory performance. Achilles repositioned himself and dashed toward Meyer, shouting that they should save the fair duel for another day. Philip, piloting Meyer, calmly apologized, saying he was too busy to accept another fight after this one. Achilles strikes a powerful attack, causing the ground to shatter, but he was shocked when Meyer suddenly disappeared from view. In an instant, Meyer cut off Achilles' arm with a single swing, causing the massive gigant to collapse. Achilles, dazed, noticed the aura and speed of Meyer's rider, and suddenly remembered the rider who had disappeared 3 years ago, the undefeated legend of the Gigant Arena, the Black Knight's sword. Meyer finished Achilles with another swift slash. The host shouted in amazement, declaring that something unprecedented had occurred. Achilles had been made inoperable in a flash, and the winner of the match was Meyer, the unexpected underdog. The audience erupted into thunderous cheers, celebrating Meyer's stunning victory. Achilles' rider, laughing, addressed Philip, expressing disbelief that he had the chance to meet the Black Knight again. Philip, surprised, asked the man if he knew him. The rider explained that he had faced the Black Knight in the Royal Arena 3 years ago, but had been left in awe after the legend vanished following his record-setting victories. He then asked Philip why he was in a place like this. Philip humbly replied that he was the Black Knight, but it was only natural for him to help people in need. The rider agreed and reassured Philip. He also promised to keep the fact that he was the Black Knight a secret. Philip thanked him and apologized for the trouble, while the rider, growing weary, said it was fine and waved it off. Meanwhile, Victor was in tears, telling Reina that they had won. Reina, puzzled, asked Victor why he was crying during such a joyous moment. Simon watched the happy Reina and concluded that everything seemed fine now. Quietly, he walked away from the stage, thinking he could finally leave that place with a lighter heart. As he walked, he stopped and glanced at the betting board, reflecting that gambling was all about the flow. He noticed that Meyer's odds had been set at 21-1, and thought to himself how easy it was to make money in this world. He then reviewed the financial outcome of the match for the lamer fiefdom. They had sold a statue for 3,000 pesos, doubling it to 6,000 pesos through gambling. Then they earned another 4,000 pesos, making their total earnings 10,000 pesos. With the 21-to-1 payout from Meyer's victory, their total winnings amounted to an astounding 210,000 pesos. That's all for today, guys. See you on the next upload.